When the old school collapsed like a house of cards, the sirens were still far away. Dust turned noon into midnight. Somewhere inside that choking dark, a single small voice kept calling for her mother. Daniel, combat boots grinding over glass, breath steady like a metronome, knelt beside his K9. He pressed his forehead to Shadow's and whispered the only order that mattered: find her. The dog vanished into the wreckage as if swallowed by the ruin, and the cry went silent. The first tremor was so slight most people mistook it for a heavy truck rolling by. The second tremor wasn't. It hit Miller's Creek like a shoulder check from a giant, rattling window panes and lurching shelves into motion. And the third tremor, if you could still call it a tremor, was a collapse, the kind of buckling roar that makes birds rip away from trees and sends everyone else running in the wrong direction, toward the sound. Daniel and Shadow were 3 blocks away, just exiting the hardware store with coil rope and extra carabiners, just in case, Daniel had said earlier, a habit he never could shake. The third hit threw him into a parked pickup, knocking the rope from his grip. Shadow slid, claws scrabbling, then found purchase, body stiff as a drawn bow. When the echo finally died, a wall of dust rolled down Ashford Street, too fast to be weather, too heavy to be smoke. Daniel didn't wait for the questions that would come later. He slapped the truck twice, habit, and ran. The first thing he saw as the dust thinned was the old brick wing of Miller's Creek Elementary gone at the middle, like a loaf of bread ripped open by invisible hands. Lockers lay crushed like tin, classroom posters fluttered from snapped staples, and the flagpole leaned at a wrong angle, the kind that makes your stomach drop harder than the earth just did. The scream he expected never came. There was only the wild tinnitus of quiet after catastrophe. Then, a small, clean note cutting through the mess. It wasn't a scream. Not even a sob. Just a thin, stubborn thread of sound: Mom. Mom. He didn't remember moving, only the sensation of Shadow surging at his side, harness straps biting into Daniel's palm as they picked their path over a terrain that wanted to change with every step. A math teacher stumbled past, bleeding at the hairline, babbling about room 2B. Someone yelled about the gas line. Someone else about a missing roll call sheet. Fractions of crisis, none of them the whole. Commands 4 minutes out, a firefighter shouted, skidding to a stop near Daniel. We set a hot zone, we waited. Kid under there, Daniel said, already dropping to one knee. Shadow was nose down, breathing the rubble like it was a paragraph he needed to read out loud. We don't have 4. The firefighter glanced at the fissured corner where an exterior wall had pancaked into the corridor. The block had knitted itself into a nightmare of weight, the kind of trap that punishes hurry. You military? Soldier, Daniel said without looking up. K9 search certified. Shadow's trained. He didn't add, trained for places just like this, the ones that smell like dust and fear and decisions you only get one chance to make right. Shadow's tail stiffened, then wagged once, compressed, serious. The dog shifted to a low crawl, muzzle pointed into a dark seam under an angled slab. The seam exhaled a thin ribbon of chalky air. Daniel shed the coil rope, clipped it to Shadow's harness as a failsafe, and switched on the chest light. Search, he whispered, voice dropping into the register Shadow knew best. The shepherd melted forward, a wedge of wool sliding into the wreckage. Dust coated his black antan coat until he looked like a statue pulled from an attic. He stopped, sneezed, then pushed deeper. Hold up, the firefighter said, but he knelt beside Daniel anyway. We could bring this whole side down. We could, Daniel said. His heart beat a measured time he'd learned overseas when everything else wanted to rush. But if we wait and that gas hits a spark, we don't get another try. There are moments when a town decides who it is. Miller's Creek decided in a single nod from a man with soot on his chin. 2 minutes, the firefighter said. Then we shore it. Shadow's chest light cut a thin path through a belly of concrete. He wormed forward on elbows, harness scraping. Daniel leaned to the opening, ear tilted. At first, there was only the rasp of Shadow's breath and the hiss of settling dust. Then a small sound, not the word from before, but a hitch, a damp breath that catches when a child runs out of tears. It came from somewhere that felt both near and impossibly far. "Good boy," Daniel breathed, the words a rope. "Find her, Shadow." He had given that order before, in training fields painted with flags and in real places that didn't have names anymore. But here the syllables felt heavier, each letter a promise he had no right to make and every intention to keep. Shadow's collar tag chimed against rebar. He paused. A soft woof, the kind he'd been taught to give when he had scent in a tight space. He shifted, neck stretching. Daniel's forearms prickled. "She's there," he murmured. "He's got her." "Hey!" Daniel called, pitching his voice to carry without shaking the structure. "I'm Daniel. I'm with a search dog. Can you hear him?" Silence. Then, faint, a whisper rolled in dust. I hear the collar." A cough. "It jingles." Daniel closed his eyes a beat. The last 2 weeks he'd been stateside, he thought about how quiet safe towns were, how promising. He opened his eyes to wreckage anyway. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily," the whisper said, as if she were sharing a secret she wasn't sure she was allowed to tell. "Hi, Emily," he said. "We're going to get you out. I need you to keep talking to Shadow. He's brave, but he likes compliments." A small, ragged giggle leaked through the stone. "Good dog," Shadow answered with a tiny thump of his tail against something metal. The firefighter swore softly, half prayer, half plan, and squeezed a radio. "We've got a live child," he said. "Marking access at the south corridor collapse. Gas line suspected. Bring shoring, airbags, and cribbing. Move." A tremor, just a whisper of the earlier violence, rippled through the ground. The slab above them creaked, a weight clearing its throat. Everyone froze. Dust lifted like a breath, then settled. Somewhere distant, a siren finally found its note. 2 minutes are up," the firefighter said, but his voice held a different thing now, something like allegiance. "We sure where you say." Daniel pointed to the corners of the slab, finger tracing the memory of structural diagrams he'd studied on sleepless nights. "Here and here. Build fast. Shadow's on her." "On it." As hands moved, Daniel slid his arm into the seam until concrete kissed his elbow and the flashlight glare turned the dust into glitter. He could see Shadow's eyes now, steady, fixed, reflecting him back. Between the dog's shoulders and a snarled knot of rebar, a shadow smaller than a backpack trembled, a pink strap, a bent ruler, a braid caught under a brick. "Emily," he said, voice low, "the way you talk to someone at the edge of a cliff, we're not going anywhere. Just keep telling Shadow he's brave." "Brave," she whispered, and the word was an anchor. The ground held its breath. The town did, too. The river answered with teeth. Daniel's breath came in hard bursts as he pushed back from the splintered brink, scanning the dark water for any sign of wrecks. Lightning forked across the sky and turned the flood into molten steel for a heartbeat, and in that flash he thought he saw movement, something dark circling a whirl near the downstream bend. Then the night swallowed it. "Rex," he shouted again, useless against the roaring current. The name broke in the rain and flew away. Training kicked in, steadying the panic. If he jumped blind, the river would take 2 of them. If he froze, it would take 3. He forced himself to move. He spun, sprinting along the fractured span, boots skidding on soaked planks, until he reached the abutment where the bridge met stone. A rusted utility box jutted from the railing, old maintenance cache. He wrenched it open. Inside, a coil of frayed rope, a bent carabiner, a cracked floodlight with a dying battery. He grabbed everything, looped the rope around his torso, and clipped it with the carabiner to his pack's anchor loop. Not ideal. Not safe. But better than nothing. On the road behind him, voices rose, a pair of figures blinking through rain, flashlights bobbing. A volunteer firefighter in a yellow slicker and a teenager in a Letterman jacket skidded to a stop at the barricade tape that whipped like a flag. "Sergeant Ward," the firefighter shouted, pushing the tape aside. "Chief sent us to back you up. The South Trail gives access to the bend." "Good," Daniel barked. "I need a fixed anchor, tree, guardrail, anything that'll hold 300 pounds under a jerk. I'm going in online. You," he pointed to the teen, "keep that light on the water, 10 degrees wide sweep, slow. If you see a dog or a kid, yell and keep that beam steady." The boy nodded, throat working. "Why yes, sir." "Names?" "Pete," the firefighter said. "This is Nolan. He's my neighbor." "Pete, Nolan, Rex is in there. There's a girl too, maybe 12. Car went off the midspan. We don't have minutes, maybe seconds. Move." They ran together along the road, cutting down the muddy slope that switched back to the river path. The ground slid under their feet, clay turning to grease. Daniel half-surfed, half-stumbled, one hand on the rope coil and the other bracing against saplings. The river's roar grew deeper, closer, an engine of water grinding the valley. At the bottom, willows whipped like frightened animals. The trail vanished into flood. In the beam of Nolan's flashlight, Daniel saw the bend open out like a mouth, the current shredding around a half-submerged snag, the trunk of an ancient cottonwood ripped from the bank, its roots clawing at nothing. Debris slammed it and spun away, coolers, shingles, a trash bin, something that looked too much like the hood of a car. Daniel's chest tightened. "There," he said, pointing. "Anchor line here." He tossed the rope around the fattest willow and yanked to test it. The bark squealed but held. He doubled the coil and tied a bowline around his waist, then a quick backup knot for spite. He clipped the carabiner, checked it twice, then looked up at Pete. "If the tree goes, I go. If I go diagonally, don't try to haul me upstream, you'll lose the line. Angle to the bank. You got that?" Pete set himself, boots digging into mud, rope wrapped around his hips for a body belay. "Got it. Say it again if you want me to shoot the moon, I'm not letting go." Nolan stood to Daniel's right, flashlight trembling. He swallowed, then forced his hand steady, sweeping the beam the way Daniel had said. "I don't see, wait." No, just a log." Daniel tuned out the rest. He took 3 measured breaths, closed his eyes for 1 heartbeat, and pictured Rex, the dog's face when he learned a new command, the way he leaned against Daniel's leg when the nightmares tightened into fists. "Find," Daniel whispered into the river's spray. "Hold." Then he stepped into the flood. The water tried to climb him, rip him to pieces, take him apart bone by bone. Cold slammed his chest like a hammer, squeezing the air out. He ducked, feeling the current muscle past his shoulders, and kicked out at a diagonal to avoid being dragged straight down. The rope jerked as it took his weight. He pulled in a rhythm, 2 kicks, 1 reach, 2 kicks, 1 reach, fighting the river's desire to spin him. The beam from Nolan's light jittered somewhere on his left, slicing pale bars across the rain. He kept his eyes low, scanning for the triangular line that meant ahead, the V-wake of something alive. A shape burst up 5 yards downstream, coughed, sank. Daniel heard himself snarl and lunged. The rope yanked his waist and bit into muscle. He dragged himself along it, sight fixed on that patch of water. "Rex," he roared, and for a brutal second the current formed a window. In it, teeth. Not bared in threat, but clamped around the sleeve. A slim arm attached to the sleeve. A small face blue-white in the lightning flash, eyes glassy with terror. And beside it, a dark head whipped by spray, ears plastered back, the dog's body straining as he fought to keep that arm above water. "I've got you." Daniel slammed into them. The river tried to roll all three. Daniel hooked his left arm around the girl's chest, pinning her to him. The cold shocked her inhalation into a choking sob. "Hold on," he said, mouth to her ear, not sure the words existed outside his skull. He reached for Rex with his right hand and found harness straps slick with water. Rex's jaws shifted, searching for a better grip, unwilling to release the fabric in case the current snatched it away. "Rex, out!" Daniel commanded, voice clipped. Even now, trained habit cut through chaos. Rex released the sleeve instantly and shoved his head against Daniel's fist, presenting the harness handle. Daniel seized it, locking his hand through the loop, and felt a shudder of relief. "Contact. Team," she whispered. He could feel her pulse, thin, racing, determined. It was a fast drum in a far room, and somehow he could hear it clearly. He looked at Shadow, and the dog looked back as if to say, "The map goes through here. Don't get lost." The dust inside Miller's Creek Elementary was a character all its own, alive, stubborn, unwilling to settle. It coated tongues, burned eyes, and painted everything the same pale gray, as if the world had been erased and rewritten in chalk. Daniel had learned in war zones that dust could be a liar. It hid tripwires. It disguised edges. But it could also tell the truth if you knew how to read it. Right now, Daniel needed truth more than anything. Shadow's nose twitched in microbursts, the kind of rapid-fire sampling that looked like nervousness to outsiders but was actually precision. The shepherd wasn't sniffing blindly, he was building a story in molecules. Dust held scent like wet sand held footprints. Emily's small breaths pushed faint signatures through cracks, threading themselves into this powdery fog. To Daniel, the dust was suffocating. To Shadow, it was a map. The firefighters worked rhythmically behind them, cribbing, wedging, whispering prayers they didn't admit were prayers. Daniel stayed at the seam, eyes flicking between Shadow's signals and the thin gap that connected them to Emily. He could hear her, faint but steady, sometimes murmuring a single word when she felt his silence stretch too long. "Here," she would say, or "dog." Short bursts, small anchors to prove she hadn't drifted away. Daniel pressed his cheek near the hole. "Emily, you're doing incredible. I need you to tell me one thing. Is it dark where you are, or can you see any light at all?" A pause. Then her voice, thinner than before, "Dark. But I see red." Daniel stiffened. Red could mean a reflection from Shadow's harness light. But it could also mean blood, or an electrical wire bleeding color in the dim. He kept his tone level. "Red's good, it means you're looking somewhere light wants to go. Keep your eyes there. Don't blink too long." Shadow pawed at the edge of the opening, his claws catching tiny ridges. Then he sneezed and backed half an inch, ears pricking. Daniel recognized the cue. The dog had caught something else, something not Emily. "Talk to me, boy," Daniel whispered. Shadow lowered his snout again and gave a low, short bark, one bark, clipped. It wasn't his victim-found bark. It was his obstacle bark, the one Daniel had drilled into him during nights of obstacle course training. Something was blocking them, and Shadow knew it mattered. Daniel slid a small rescue camera, a snake-like lens on a fiber line, into the gap. The screen fuzzed with static, then resolved into gray swirls. Dust clung to the lens like snowflakes on glass. He eased it further. A blur of pink appeared, Emily's backpack strap. Then her braid, trembling with each shallow breath. Relief surged through him, until the camera tilted and revealed what Shadow had smelled. A metal cabinet, collapsed sideways, leaned across Emily's lower half. Its sharp corner pinned her hip and leg against concrete. The dust line around it showed the weight hadn't shifted since the collapse. Good news, it meant she wasn't crushed by movement. Bad news, it meant freeing her would be like disarming a bomb. "She's trapped under a cabinet," Daniel said, showing the feed to the commander. "Pressure's stable, but one wrong lift and it'll shear down. The commander's jaw flexed. We'll need to build a cage around that corner before we move it. We don't let gravity dictate terms. Daniel nodded. He cut his mic and spoke softly toward the hole. Emily, you're doing great. I can see you now. You've got a strong light around you. The red? Yes, Daniel said gently. That's the light bouncing near your back. It means Shadow can see you. He says you look tough. A tiny exhale, half laugh, half cough. He's brave. He is, Daniel agreed. But you know what he's waiting for? He's waiting for you to tell him a secret. Something only you know. That's his favorite kind of courage. Another pause. Then, softly, she whispered, my mom says, when I'm scared, I should sing. Daniel's throat tightened. That's a good secret, he said. Can you sing now, Emily? Just for Shadow? And then, so faint Daniel had to close his eyes to believe it, came a cracked melody. Off-key, trembling, but undeniably a song, something about sunshine, the kind of tune kids learn on playgrounds. Shadow tilted his head, ears flicking in rhythm, and gave the softest whine Daniel had ever heard from him. For the first time since the collapse, the space didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a room with music. The firefighters froze for a second, listening. Even the commander, hard-faced as steel, blinked and turned away as if the dust had stung her eyes. Then the rhythm of work resumed, sharper, stronger, carrying that melody with them like a drumbeat. Daniel straightened, voice clipped back to command tone. We've got a target location, confirmed airway, and partial entrapment. Next move is stabilizing the cabinet with secondary cribbing. We'll need low-angle lifts, no vibration. On it, said a rescuer, already hauling timber. We'll build her a wooden coffin she walks out of alive. Emily's song faltered. Daniel, it hurts. I know, he said quickly. That means you're still here. Shadow's telling me you're stronger than the hurt. Can you give him one more line of your song? She did. And Shadow, as if he'd been born for this, gave a single wag of his tail and pressed his nose closer, until dust streaked his muzzle white. Daniel swallowed hard. He had been in firefights where bullets cracked air like whips. He had been under skies where drones buzzed like hornets. But nothing had felt this loud, this final. Here, in a half-broken school, it was a child's fragile song against a building's crushing silence, and a dog who refused to stop listening. And Daniel knew, the real battle wasn't against falling concrete. It was against time. The human body knows when it's beneath something that wants to kill it. Daniel felt it in his spine, in the twitch of his jaw, in the way his breath came shallow despite training. The slab above them groaned as if reminded of its own weight. Every creak was a reminder, one misstep, one vibration too sharp, and the school would stop being a rescue site and become a tomb. The firefighters worked fast, but never frantic. Their boots struck dust-softened rhythms. Each timber they slid into place was a prayer disguised as carpentry. They built box upon box, cribbing stacks strong enough to shoulder giants. The commander circled constantly, scanning angles, pointing sharp fingers to direct load paths. She never raised her voice, but she never repeated herself, either. Every order landed like a hammer, once, clean, final. Daniel kept his post at the seam, one hand resting on Shadow's rope, the other on the cracked edge of concrete. The shepherd hadn't budged from his position. His nose was practically glued to the fissure, ears twitching every time Emily breathed or whispered another line of her shaky song. Dust made his eyes water, but he didn't blink it away. Dogs don't abandon posts, not this dog. Emily, Daniel said softly into the gap, we're stabilizing the cabinet on top of you. That means we're making sure it won't shift when we move other things. I need you to stay very still while the team does their work. Can you do that? Yes, she breathed. But it feels heavy. It does, Daniel said. He kept his tone even, though his gut twisted. But that heaviness is steady right now. It's not moving. Think of it like a big, sleepy bear. It's heavy, but as long as we don't poke it wrong, it won't wake up. A faint giggle, cracked at the edges but still a giggle, came through. A bear. That's right, Daniel said. And Shadow's job is to keep that bear asleep until we pull you free. Shadow tilted his head, as though he understood the lie they were both agreeing to believe. His tail brushed once against Daniel's arm, steady and sure. Behind them, the sound of mallets striking wedges built a rhythm like a heartbeat. The cribbing rose around the cabinet corner, framing it in wood. The firefighters called out short confirmations, loads biting, wedge holding, shift neutral. Daniel recognized the language. It was the same clipped certainty soldiers used in the field, no room for hesitation, no room for doubt. Then the earth itself disagreed. A tremor, small but sharp, ran underfoot. It wasn't enough to topple anything, but it was enough to remind everyone that the fault line below Miller's Creek was still alive. Dust cascaded in thin streams from the slab above, and the metal cabinet groaned against Emily's trapped leg. "Hold," the commander snapped. Every mallet froze mid-swing. Every hand stilled. The whole site seemed to breathe out once, then wait. Shadow whined low in his throat, not panicked, not warning, just acknowledging the shift. Daniel tightened his grip on the rope. His chest ached with the pressure of not moving, not even twitching. The tremor ebbed. Silence returned, thick as tar. Daniel exhaled through his nose. "Emily," he said, voice calm as lake water. "Still with me?" "Yes," came the whisper, thinner now. It hurts more." Daniel pinched his eyes shut a second. The tremor must have shifted weight onto her. He forced his voice steady. "Pain means you're awake. Awake means you're strong. Stay with Shadow's breathing, okay?" "Okay." The commander leaned near him. "We've got to cage that cabinet fast. If weight's shifted, she'll lose circulation. We've got minutes, not hours." "Then minutes is all we need," Daniel said. His tone left no room for argument. They attacked the work in silence, stacking timbers, wedging braces, creating a wooden halo around the cabinet. Each wedge strike echoed in Daniel's bones. He tracked every sound, every vibration, waiting for the one noise he prayed wouldn't come, the long, final groan of collapse. Instead, another sound reached him, Emily, humming again. Her voice shook, but the tune held. She was still fighting, still trying to keep her courage alive. Shadow's ears flicked to the rhythm, and the shepherd gave a soft, almost imperceptible waff, like applause in dog language. Daniel leaned closer to the gap. "That's good, Emily. That's better than good. You keep humming, and we'll keep building." Minutes later, the commander's voice rang out, crisp and final, cabinet stabilized. Relief pulsed through the team like fresh air. The cribbing around the cabinet now bore its weight, spreading it into the floor instead of Emily's small frame. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was the difference between possible rescue and impossible tragedy. Daniel finally let his shoulders drop half an inch. He stroked the rope at Shadow's harness like a talisman. "Good boy. She's safer now." Shadow didn't look back, he didn't need to. His whole body stayed aimed at the gap, the way a compass needle knows where north is. The commander crouched near Daniel. "Next step is lifting the slab above her head, inch by inch. Once we've got clearance, we'll slide the cabinet clear. We move fast after that, but not before." Daniel nodded. He turned back to the crack. "Emily, the heavy bear we talked about? We just tied it down. It won't roll over on you now. Next, we're going to make more room around you. That means little noises, little shifts, but nothing dangerous. Shadow and I are here the whole time. Promise?" "I promise," Daniel said, every syllable a stone laid into that vow. A beat of silence. Then, so quiet he almost missed it, Emily whispered, "Shadow's tail keeps me from being too scared." Daniel smiled into the dust. "That's the whole point of having a dog like him." And then, as if on cue, Shadow wagged once, slow, deliberate, as though he had understood exactly what had been said. The deeper the rescue went, the more oxygen mattered. The school wasn't just a pile of bricks and wood, it was a lung with holes in it. Every shift of debris sucked air in strange directions, every creak pressed it thin. Daniel knew the signs: lips drying faster, the sting at the edge of every breath, the dizzy shimmer when dust burned the back of your throat. He wasn't worried about himself. He was worried about Emily, in her pocket of air no wider than a coffin. The commander called it before he did. "We need flow." She gestured to her crew. "Fans staged, ducts running, get controlled air in that cavity before we even think of pulling weight." Workers hustled, unrolling flexible ducting that looked like giant yellow snakes. They positioned them carefully, mouths sucking and blowing, trained to push clean air into safe pockets without stirring up collapse. The whine of the fans joined the chorus of mallets and shoring timbers. To an outsider, it might have sounded like chaos. To Daniel, it sounded like a symphony of survival. Shadow shifted, ears flattening as the new air swirled. He glanced back once at Daniel, then lowered his snout to the gap again. The shepherd's nostrils pulsed in rhythm with the duck's gentle hiss. He understood the difference between stale and fresh air, between danger and deliverance. Daniel leaned toward the fisher. "Emily, you're going to feel a breeze soon. That's us sending you some clean air. You keep breathing with Shadow, okay?" "Okay." Her voice wavered, but it was there. "Feels hot in here. It'll feel cooler in a minute. Just pretend you're blowing out birthday candles. Every breath out is a candle gone. Every breath in is another one lit." Silence, then a soft huff, as if she'd tried to do exactly that. Daniel felt his chest squeeze. He pressed his forehead briefly to the concrete, grounding himself in its grit. The duct began to hum, pushing a thin stream of blessedly clean oxygen into the cavity. A firefighter held a handheld meter against the opening. "Levels climbing," he reported. "She's getting air." For the first time in an hour, Daniel allowed himself a longer breath. He could almost taste the difference in the dust. Shadow responded, too. He wagged his tail against the stone twice, thump, thump, then pressed his nose even closer. Daniel understood. The dog knew Emily was inhaling deeper now, stronger. But hope is fragile, and the building seemed to resent it. A crack split somewhere overhead, sharp, loud, a gunshot of stone. Everyone flinched. One of the cribbing stacks spat a splinter but held. Dust plumed in a choking wave, rolling over Daniel and Shadow. The duct rattled. A rescuer cursed. "Status," the commander barked. "All shoring holding," came the reply, voices sharp with adrenaline. Daniel coughed hard, spat gray. He checked Shadow, eyes watering, but steady, unflinching. He squeezed the rope at the harness. "Good boy. Stay." Then, soft, through the gap, "Daniel? I'm here." I felt it shake. Am I gonna get out?" Daniel forced his voice to be the bedrock she needed. "Yes. You are." That shake was just the bear rolling over a little. "Remember what we did? We tied him down. He's not going anywhere." A pause, then, "Shadow's still here?" "Always." Shadow chose that exact second to whine low and press his paw against the crack, claws clicking faintly on concrete. It wasn't coincidence. Dogs know timing better than clocks. Emily gave a tiny laugh, half sob, half hope. "Okay." The commander crouched beside Daniel. We've got to lift the overhead slab another 6 inches before we move the cabinet. If gas is clear and airflow stable, we start the inch lift protocol. Daniel nodded. His throat burned, but his eyes were steady. Do it. The rescuers slid in airbags, flat, rubbery bladders, beneath carefully cribbed corners. Hoses hissed. Slowly, the slab began to rise, fractions of an inch at a time. Every lift was followed by a wedge hammered home, locking the height. Inch by inch, breath by breath. Daniel spoke constantly into the gap, his voice a lifeline. Emily, tell me what Shadow smells like. Can you smell him through the crack? A pause. Then, he smells like dirt. And something warm. That's his way of saying he's watching over you. What do you smell like? Daniel smiled faintly, though dust cracked the corners of his lips. Like trouble, most days. But today? Like sweat and rope. A weak giggle. Rope smells funny. Yeah, Daniel said. But it's strong. And strong is what we need right now. The slab lifted another inch. The cabinet trembled against its new brace, then went still. The cavity widened enough that Daniel could see Emily more clearly through the snake camera. Her braid was loose now, dust white. Her face was smudged, but her eyes, God, her eyes were open, looking toward the crack like it was the only star in her sky. Shadow's nose nudged closer, muzzle coated gray. The shepherd gave a soft woof, as if to say, not much longer. And for a heartbeat, Daniel believed it. Then the air monitor shrieked. Reading spike, the firefighter holding it shouted. Carbon monoxide, jumped hard. Shut down fans, the commander barked. Pull duct, isolate, now. Chaos erupted. Fans cut. The duct hissed dry. The hum of clean air vanished, leaving only the scratchy gasp of settling dust. Daniel leaned to the gap, heart pounding. Emily, listen to me. The air's going to feel heavy again for a moment. I need you to breathe slow, just like Shadow. Follow his rhythm. Don't rush. Trying, she whispered. Shadow shifted, lowering his chest until his ribcage brushed the stone. He breathed deliberately slow, exaggerating each rise and fall. His entire body became a metronome for survival. Daniel mirrored him, exaggerating his own breaths so Emily could hear 2 anchors on either side of the stone. In. Hold. Out. Hold. Just like us. In. Hold. Out. Her voice was a thread, but it was there. The commander snapped new orders, calling for portable scrubbers, rerouting ducts. But Daniel tuned them out. In this moment, it wasn't about technology or protocol. It was about a soldier, a dog, and a child synchronizing lungs across stone and dust, proving that breath was still stronger than collapse. For 2 minutes that felt like 2 centuries, they breathed as one. And when the air monitor finally steadied, when the firefighter called levels stabilizing, Daniel didn't cheer. He only pressed his hand to Shadow's back and whispered, "Good boy." Because both of them knew, the real test hadn't even started. Every rescue has a moment where silence becomes its own enemy. In Miller's Creek Elementary, it came after the fans shut down. The world went eerily still, no whine of ducks, no hammer of wedges, no hiss of airbags. Just dust sifting down like dry snow and the rasp of lungs working too hard. Daniel felt it immediately. The silence pressed, thick and expectant, as though the building itself was listening. He crouched lower, one hand on the rope clipped to Shadow's harness, the other braced against the slab. His ears strained for Emily's voice. Nothing. Emily, he called softly into the gap. Talk to me. A beat. 2. Then, weak, but there, I'm here. Relief loosened the knot in his chest. Good. Keep saying that for me. Say I'm here. I'm here, she whispered again, each word costing her. Shadow whined low, a sound that rumbled more in his chest than throat. Daniel felt it through the harness rope, a vibration of worry. The dog shifted, pressing his snout deeper, ears flattening. He didn't like the silence either. The commander appeared at Daniel's side, crouching. Her hard eyes softened for a fraction. Scrubbers are running. Air's stabilizing. But levels are borderline. We have to move faster. Faster means risk, Daniel said. Not moving means worse. He knew she was right. Emily's breaths were thinner, each one stretched like a rubber band about to snap. They had minutes, maybe less, before the pocket she was in went bad. Airbags again, the commander ordered. We're going to lift the slab 3 more inches. That's clearance enough to drag the cabinet off her. Then extraction. Rescuers moved like chess pieces, silent, deliberate. Airbags hissed, inflating under the slab. The wood stacks groaned as wedges bit deeper. Dust cascaded. The whole building exhaled in long, grudging sighs. And then, as the slab rose, it happened. A sharp crack split the silence, loud, violent, final. The world seemed to stop. Everyone froze. The crack wasn't wood. It wasn't glass. It was stone giving up. Shadow barked once, sharp and urgent. Daniel's instincts kicked in before thought. He yanked the rope, pulling Shadow back, shielding him with his body. Dust exploded in a cloud. A section of the corridor wall buckled, spitting bricks like teeth. A support beam bent with a metallic scream, then held, barely. Status, the commander barked, coughing through her mask. Cribbing intact, one rescuer shouted. Secondary wall collapse, east corridor. Daniel turned back to the gap, panic biting his throat. Emily. Answer me. Nothing. He pressed closer, almost shoving his face into the crack. Emily. Say something. The silence stretched like a noose. His heart pounded against his ribs. Shadow clawed at the ground, muzzle shoving toward the gap. Then, faint, so faint he almost thought he imagined it, Daniel. His breath shuddered out. Yes. I'm here. You're okay. That was just noise. You're safe. It fell near me. Daniel forced calm. It didn't touch you. You're still safe. Listen to Shadow. He's right here. Shadow gave a soft, deliberate woof, pressing his nose into the dust until his muzzle was white. Emily made a broken sound that was half sob, half laugh. I hear him. Good, Daniel said. That means we're still winning. The commander leaned in. We don't get another warning. If one more crack like that goes, we're all under it. Daniel nodded grimly. He turned back to the gap. Emily, listen carefully. We're about to move the heavy thing on your leg. It might hurt, but it'll mean freedom. You'll feel things shift. Don't be scared. Shadow and I won't let anything happen. Promise? I promise, Daniel said, the word heavy as an oath. The crew repositioned, sliding pry bars and jacks under the stabilized cabinet. On my count, the commander said. Lift slow, wedge fast. 3, 2, 1. Metal groaned. The cabinet tilted. Emily cried out in pain, sharp, raw, but alive. Daniel's stomach clenched, but he forced his voice steady. That's it, Emily. That's the hurt leaving. You're doing perfect. Shadow barked twice, clipped, urgent, but not panicked. Daniel knew the cue. Shadow was marking, she's moving, she's alive. The cabinet shifted another inch, then another. Rescuers slammed wedges, locking it off. Daniel pushed the camera back in. The feed cleared just enough to show Emily's leg, pale, pinned, but visible now. blood stained her sock, dark against the dust. "We've got sight on the limb," Daniel shouted. "Stabilize her," the commander snapped. A medic crawled forward with bandages and splints. They threaded gear through the gap, working blind but precise, wrapping what they could reach. Emily whimpered, the sound thin as paper. Daniel pressed his face to the crack. "Emily, listen to me. You are stronger than this pain. You've already beaten the silence, you've beaten the dark. This is just the last step. I'm strong. The strongest kid I've ever met." Shadow pressed his paw flat against the stone, claws scraping lightly. Emily reached toward it with trembling fingers through the gap. They didn't touch, but they were close. Close enough for courage to flow. The commander's voice cut sharp. "Clear path for extraction in 30 seconds. Lift again on my mark." Daniel braced. His muscles ached, his lungs burned, but his eyes never left the crack. He wouldn't let Emily see fear in him, not when hers was written across every breath. The building creaked again, long and low, but the cribbing held. Dust rained like confetti at a funeral. "Emily," Daniel said, voice steady as steel. "In 30 seconds, we're pulling you out. That means you're about to leave the dark and see the sky again. Shadow's waiting to walk you out. You ready?" A pause. Then, faint but firm, "Ready." And for the first time since the collapse, Daniel believed she truly was. Every rescue narrows down to one moment, the thin edge where success and tragedy balance on the same breath. For Daniel, that moment came with the commander's next words. "Final lift. We clear the cabinet, we pull her out, or we don't get another shot." The crew moved with surgical focus. Airbags slid deeper under the slab, hoses coiled tight in sweating hands. Pry bars gleamed through dust. Cribbing stacks, now shoulder-high, looked like fragile fortresses against the weight of a broken world. Daniel stayed at the fissure, Shadow pressed close, both of them breathing Emily's rhythm through the stone. She hadn't spoken in a minute. That silence gnawed at him more than any groan of concrete. "Emily," he whispered. "This is it. One more push. I need you with me." A pause, then a whisper, thin as a thread, "I'm here." He closed his eyes for half a second, letting the words steady him. "Good. You stay with me, kid. You and Shadow are walking out of here together." Shadow wagged once, deliberate, pressing his nose to the gap. Dust streaked his muzzle until he looked like a ghost dog guarding the line between worlds. The commander's voice cut through the tension. "On my mark, inflate, lift, wedge. 1 inch at a time." "Ready." "Ready," the crew echoed. The hiss began. Airbags swelled, groaning against the slab. The massive stone shifted upward, fraction by fraction. Cribbing stacks screamed with pressure, then settled into grim acceptance. Every wedge hammered home sent vibrations through the ground, rattling Daniel's bones. Emily cried out as the cabinet shifted. Her voice was raw, cracked with pain, but alive. "It hurts." "I know," Daniel said quickly. His tone was firm, steady, the same way he used to talk to soldiers on their first patrol. "That's the sound of you beating it. That's the sound of the Rubble losing." Shadow barked once, sharp and commanding, as if to punctuate the words. Emily whimpered but didn't go silent. "Another half-inch," the commander ordered. The slab rose again. The cabinet tilted, groaned, then slid away from Emily's trapped leg. For the first time since the collapse, her small body had space to breathe. "Cabinet clear," a rescuer shouted. Cheers threatened to break, but the commander snapped them back into focus. "Not done. Extraction now." A medic crawled forward, threading a collapsible board through the gap. Daniel fed it in, guiding it with trembling fingers until he felt it press against Emily's side. "Emily, we're sliding a board under you," he said. You'll feel it lift. It's safe. Just stay very still. I'm scared. Shadow's here, Daniel said. And I'm not letting go. The shepherd pressed closer, muzzle nearly wedged into the crack. He gave a low, steady whine, the kind that meant, trust me. Emily's breathing hitched, then steadied. Okay. They worked carefully, inching the board beneath her. Every shift drew small cries of pain, but each cry was another confirmation, she was still fighting. Boards under, the medic called. Package her, the commander ordered. Bandages and straps followed, slid through, wrapped blind but secure. Daniel guided Emily's wrist into place, fingers brushing hers briefly. They were so small, so cold. He wanted to hold them, but he forced himself to let go. Almost there, Emily. Almost. Then came the order he had been waiting for, on my count, pull. Daniel braced, shadow tense beside him. 3, 2, 1, pull. The team hauled as one. The board slid, scraping stone, dragging Emily inch by inch through the gap. She screamed once, the sound tearing through dust and hearts alike, but then her braid appeared, then her shoulders, then her whole small body emerging from the stone's grip. Shadow lunged forward, tail thrashing, licking her face the moment it cleared. Emily sobbed into his fur, arms weak but clutching. For a second, time stopped, soldier, dog, and child tangled in dust and tears, proof that survival was still possible. She's out. Daniel shouted, voice cracking. Paramedics swarmed, lifting Emily onto a stretcher, checking vitals, threading oxygen. She clung to Shadow's harness strap like it was a lifeline. Her lips moved, whispering something Daniel barely caught, brave dog. Daniel's knees nearly buckled, relief hitting harder than exhaustion. He pressed his forehead to Shadow's for a moment, whispering, you did it, boy. But the commander's sharp voice cut the reunion short. We're not clear yet. This structure is coming down around us. Everyone move. The building groaned again, louder this time, an angry roar echoing down broken corridors. Dust plumed in a choking wave. The world wasn't finished trying to bury them. Daniel scooped Shadow's rope and grabbed the stretcher rail. Then we run together. And with Emily safe but the school still threatening to collapse, they began the last, desperate push for daylight. The first step out of the cavity should have been relief. Instead, it was a starting gun. The moment Emily cleared the rubble, the school gave a sound no one mistook, a deep, rolling growl that meant gravity had changed its mind. Beans shrieked. Bricks cascaded in choking sheets. The building wasn't waiting for applause, it was folding in on itself. Move, 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 the commander roared. Paramedics rushed Emily's stretcher toward daylight, boots pounding broken tile. Daniel stayed glued to the rail, Shadow at his side like a second shadow, rope taut between them. The shepherd barked at the ceiling, ears flat, his instincts screaming what no words could, it's coming down. The corridor narrowed to a gauntlet of falling debris. Fluorescent lights dangled like broken bones, flickering one last protest before shattering. A chalkboard crashed, spewing dust like smoke. Every sound was thunder. Watch your heads, a rescuer shouted, throwing himself against a falling beam to deflect its arc. It smashed inches from the stretcher, splintering into shards. Emily cried out, clutching Shadow's harness even tighter. Daniel leaned low over her, shielding her with his own frame. His body remembered firefights, mortar blasts, nights under skies that wanted to erase him. This wasn't different. Cover the child. Trust the dog. Move forward. The commander led from the front, barking orders that cut through chaos. Left wall intact. Hug left. Watch the cracks overhead. Her voice was the only thing sharper than the collapse. Shadow surged ahead, pulling against the rope. He wasn't just running blind, he was reading the world like a map again. His nose twitched, catching drafts of fresh air. He barked once, then veered left toward a corridor half blocked by lockers. "Shadow's got a path," Daniel shouted. The crew trusted without question. They followed the dog into the tighter corridor, dragging the stretcher sideways to squeeze past twisted metal. Sparks spat from a severed wire, hissing like snakes. Shadow ducked low, ears plastered. Daniel yanked the rope short, shielding him with his arm. Behind them, the ceiling gave way in a roar. The corridor they just abandoned collapsed into a smoking heap. Heat and dust punched their backs. Emily coughed violently, but her grip didn't loosen. "Almost there," Daniel yelled, his voice raw. The world answered with another groan. The floor shuddered, buckling under their boots. A rescuer went down to one knee, almost spilling the stretcher, but Daniel grabbed the rail and hauled, muscles screaming. Shadow barked sharply, darting back to nip the rescuer's sleeve as if to drag him upright. The man staggered, eyes wide, and kept running. Then, light. At the far end of the ruined hall, a hole gaped in the wall where rescue crews had already breached. Sunlight slanted in, cutting through dust like a blade of gold. Outside, more hands waved, calling them forward. "Go! Go!" the commander bellowed. Every step toward the light felt like defiance. The building hurled debris after them like a giant shaking its cage. Ceiling panels slammed down. Glass rained in deadly glitter. The stretcher bumped over rubble, Emily whimpering with each jolt. "Hang on, kid," Daniel shouted. "We're not losing you now." Shadow barked again, his body a streak of muscle and wool as he raced toward the light. He darted ahead of the stretcher, then circled back, barking, urging them on as if he could pull the whole team himself. The last 20 feet were the longest of Daniel's life. The floor pitched, cracked, then sagged under their weight. A rescuer cursed, shouting, "It's giving! No stopping!" Daniel roared. "Run it!" They sprinted as the ground split behind them. Dust exploded upward, the building howling in collapse. The sunlight grew larger, brighter, until they burst into it, the stretcher first, then Daniel, then Shadow, leaping the final crack as the hall behind them folded in a deafening roar. They stumbled into open air, blinking against the sudden brightness. Medics swarmed Emily, lifting her stretcher to safer ground. Rescuers collapsed to their knees, coughing, some laughing in disbelief, others crying silent tears into dust-streaked gloves. Daniel dropped to one knee, clutching Shadow by the harness. The shepherd's chest heaved, his tongue lolling, dust turning him ghost-pale. Daniel pressed his forehead to the dog's. "You let us out, boy. You gave us the sky." Behind them, the school exhaled one last groan, and then the roof caved entirely, sending up a plume that blotted out the sun. The building was gone. But they weren't. Emily's weak voice rose above the chaos, fragile but determined. "I see the sky." Daniel swallowed hard, throat burning. He rose, eyes sweeping over the ruin they'd escaped. "And you're going to keep seeing it," he murmured. Because in that moment, Miller's Creek didn't just save a child. It saved itself, from despair, from silence, from forgetting that courage sometimes wears a uniform, sometimes a dog's collar, and sometimes a braid coated in dust. The sky had never looked so strange. It wasn't just the sunlight breaking through dust, it was the fact that it was still there at all, that after hours of darkness, smoke, and collapse, the sky felt like something borrowed back from the edge of death. The plume from the fallen school turned the horizon a bruised gray, but above that, the September blue was stubborn, steady, and achingly calm. Emily lay on the stretcher in that light, her hair tangled with grit, her small chest rising under an oxygen mask. Her hand clutched Shadow's harness strap like a talisman. No medic could pry it loose, so they didn't try. They simply worked around the shepherd, threading 4 lines, wrapping gauze around her scraped arms, splinting her leg where the cabinet had pinned her. Shadow stood immovable, one paw planted near her ribs, as though declaring, "This one is mine to guard." Daniel hovered nearby, unable to stand still, yet unable to walk away. His uniform was shredded, his throat raw from dust, his body aching with exhaustion. But none of it mattered. He kept his eyes on Emily's chest, on every rise and fall. He'd seen battlefields where breath stopped, where silence became permanent. He wasn't going to let this be one of them. The commander approached, her hard exterior cracked by dust and strain. She crouched beside Daniel, speaking low so the chaos around them faded. "She's alive because you went in when protocol said wait." Daniel shook his head, eyes fixed on the child. "She's alive because Shadow found her. Because the team built faster than fear. Because she refused to stop singing." The commander studied him for a beat, then nodded once. No argument, no praise. Just respect. Nearby, a woman broke free from paramedics, Emily's mother. Her face was gray with ash, streaked with tears, her legs trembling as she stumbled toward the stretcher. "Emily," she cried, voice breaking. The medics stepped aside. The mother fell to her knees, clutching her daughter's hand, sobbing into her hair. Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She tugged weakly at her mask and whispered through cracked lips, "Mom. Shadow saved me." Her mother's eyes flooded. She reached out and stroked the dog's dusty fur, whispering thanks through sobs. Shadow licked her hand once, then went back to watching Emily, ears alert, eyes fixed as if the world still threatened. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen reunions on tarmacs, in hospitals, in bombed-out cities where families thought they'd never see each other again. But this small-town miracle against falling stone, hit different. It wasn't just survival. It was proof that courage, no matter how ordinary it looked, could hold back the collapse of everything. "Sir," a medic called, breaking the moment. "We're airlifting her, legs stabilized but circulation's compromised. We need her on the chopper now." Daniel nodded, stepping back. The stretcher was lifted, moving swiftly across the parking lot where a helicopter thumped the air into chaos. Its blades churned the dust into violent spirals. Yet even then, Emily's hand clung to Shadow's harness, refusing to let go. Daniel jogged alongside as far as he was allowed. When the stretcher reached the loading ramp, Emily's small voice fought through the roar of blades. "Shadow." Daniel bent close, lifting the shepherd just enough for her to see. "He's here, Emily. He'll always be here." Her eyes, dusty, tired, but alive, met the dog's. "Brave dog," she whispered again, then let the medics guide her into the chopper. The helicopter lifted, beating the air, carrying her skyward. Daniel stood with Shadow at his side, both of them watching until the machine became a dot against the stubborn blue. Silence returned, not the choking silence of rubble but the kind that comes after a storm. Around them, firefighters slumped, medics packed gear, neighbors clung to one another. Miller's Creek had lost its school, but not its child. And that mattered more than brick or stone. Daniel crouched, running his hand along Shadow's dust-caked fur. The shepherd leaned into the touch, tail wagging once before going still again, eyes still scanning as though the fight wasn't over. "You did it," Daniel whispered. His throat burned, but his smile broke through anyway. "You gave her back the sky." Shadow looked up at him, ears flicking, and Daniel swore the dog understood. The commander's voice broke in, steady and low. "Soldier, when you looked at your dog and said, 'Find her,' you gave an order no one else could have fulfilled." And he answered. Daniel didn't reply. He didn't need to. His hand stayed on Shadow's head, grounding them both in the sunlight that still broke through smoke. And above them, the sky of Miller's Creek stayed stubbornly blue, as if promising, not everything falls. That night, Miller's Creek was quieter than it had ever been. Not the quiet of tragedy, not the suffocating silence of rubble, but the hush that comes after everyone has exhaled together. The whole town had held its breath for hours, waiting to see if one small voice in the dust would make it back to daylight. Now, with Emily alive, the air felt different. Families gathered outside the emergency shelter, candles flickering in chipped glass jars. Some brought blankets, others thermoses of coffee, and all of them brought stories, where they'd been when the ground shook, what they'd seen, how they'd heard the cry beneath the rubble and thought, God, not a child. At the center of it all, Daniel sat on the tailgate of a rescue truck, shadow stretched at his feet. The shepherd was finally still, paws out, chest rising slow and steady. His muzzle was still gray with dust, his harness scratched and frayed, but his eyes were bright, alert even in rest. Every time someone walked past, they reached out to brush his fur, whispering thanks. Shadow accepted it without fuss, as though he had always belonged to them, as though the whole town had become his pack. Daniel held a paper cup of coffee he hadn't touched. His body ached, his throat burned, but his mind kept circling the same moments, the crack that split the silence, the cry that almost didn't come, the whisper of a song in the dust. He replayed the way Emily's small hand had reached for Shadow's paw through the stone, the way she had clung to the harness strap like it was the only thing holding her to the world. The commander approached, no longer shouting orders, just walking like another neighbor. She stood beside the truck for a long moment before speaking. Helicopter called in. Emily's stable. Legs bad, but circulation's back. Doctors think she'll walk again. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, letting that truth wash over him. She'll walk with Shadow beside her, he murmured. The commander glanced at the dog, then back at him. You gave this town something tonight. Not just a rescue. Proof. Proof of what? That when everything falls, someone will still crawl into the dust and pull us out, she said. That's not something a town forgets. Daniel didn't answer. His hand dropped absently to Shadow's head, scratching behind his ears. The dog gave a tired thump of his tail, eyes half-lidded. A ripple of voices broke through the night. Neighbors parted, and Emily's mother walked forward. She looked older than the morning had made her, her face streaked with both tears and dust, but her steps were steady. She stopped in front of Daniel, her hands trembling as she clutched a folded piece of paper. She wanted me to give you this, she said softly. Daniel unfolded it carefully. Inside was a drawing, done in crayon on a scrap of school paper, Emily's hand traced in pink, Shadow's paw traced beside it in brown. Above, in shaky letters, she had written, Brave dog. Daniel's throat tightened. He folded the paper as if it were glass and slipped it into his pocket. Tell her Shadow will keep that forever. Her mother smiled through fresh tears. She bent to stroke the shepherd's fur. Thank you, she whispered, not just to the soldier, but to the dog who had carried her daughter's breath back to her. The crowd began to hum with voices, neighbors sharing relief, volunteers handing out food, children holding candles too big for their hands. It wasn't celebration. It was something deeper, the sound of a community remembering what it meant to be alive together. Daniel stood at last, stretching sore muscles. He looked down at Shadow. Come on, boy, he said. Let's walk. They moved through the crowd, people stepping aside to pat Shadow, to clap Daniel on the shoulder. The shepherd took it all in stride, head high, tail brushing calmly. For once, Daniel didn't feel like an outsider soldier back from wars no one understood. For once, he felt like part of something whole. When they reached the edge of the crowd, Daniel stopped and looked back. Miller's Creek shimmered in candlelight, a small town scarred but unbroken. The collapsed school still smoldered behind them, but its shadow no longer owned the night. Above it all, the stubborn blue sky had turned black, clear and wide, stars blinking down as if bearing witness. Daniel crouched, gripping Shadow's harness. The dog leaned into him, warm, steady. We did it, Daniel whispered. Not just for her, for all of them. Shadow looked up, eyes bright, ears pricking toward the distant hum of helicopters. Then he lit Daniel's hand once and set his gaze back on the town, as though claiming it. And so, beneath the stars of Miller's Creek, with candles flickering and neighbors holding one another close, the soldier and his dog stood watch. The town that had held its breath all day finally exhaled. And in that exhale lived something stronger than fear, stronger than stone, the promise that even when the world falls, there will be someone, man, dog, or both, willing to crawl into the dust and whisper, "You're not alone."